A woman in seat 9C was laughed at when she warned something felt off on the flight, but 10 minutes later, the captain collapsed midair, and she was the only one who could save them. What the crew didn't know. She was a former Army Black Hawk pilot, haunted by a past mission she couldn't forget. Now, at 30,000 feet with 158 lives at stake, she had to face the sky again. Welcome to my channel. People say New York never sleeps, but I did. For 2 whole years, I stayed grounded. No airports. No window seats. No tiny plastic cups of ginger ale. I avoided flying like some people avoid X's or tax season. But this morning, there I was at LaGuardia, boarding Flight 739 to Salt Lake City like I hadn't spent the last 2 years having quiet panic attacks every time a plane flew overhead. My name's Nora Whitaker. I'm 34, and once upon a time, I flew Black Hawks for the Army's 101st Airborne. Got the call sign Clover because I had the habit of coming out lucky, though I've buried enough friends to know that luck is a funny word. 7 years of service, 4 deployments, and 1 decision that ended it all. A botched evac. A dust storm. A man I couldn't save. I keep that photo folded in my wallet. The one where we're all smiling, not knowing it was the last good day. I don't look at it often, but I never take it out either. This morning, I wasn't a pilot. I was just another business consultant with a laptop bag and an over-caffeinated stomach. Seat 9C. Aisle. No exit row. Just close enough to see the cockpit door when it opened and closed. Funny thing about being grounded for a while, you start noticing what others don't. The subtle hitch in the landing gear doors as we taxied out. The slightly uneven pitch in the captain's voice over the intercom. That wasn't a standard welcome, it was hurried. And First Officer Malik, barely out of flight school if I had to guess, looked like someone trying not to fumble a test. I'd wanted to say something. Just a quiet word at the gate. Hey, I've flown. Something sounds off. But when I tried, Malik met me at the threshold with a practiced smile and a tone I know too well. Polite dismissal. Sorry, ma'am, he said, as if I'd asked to ride shotgun in a police cruiser. The flight deck isn't open to passengers. Please return to your seat. And that was that. The woman in 8B chuckled like I'd asked to take selfies with the flight controls. Some guy a row back muttered, probably watched Top Gun one too many times. I didn't respond. Didn't explain. You learn not to, after a while. Being a female pilot doesn't come with a badge of honor. It comes with an invisible checklist of things people expect you to be wrong about. I sat down, buckled in, breathed deep. 2 minutes later, we were pushing back. The usual ballet of safety demonstrations began. I caught snippets of the flight attendants whispering about a passenger who wanted a cockpit tour. I knew they were talking about me. It stung more than I wanted it to. It always stings. But I pushed the hurt aside, focused on the vibrations of the floor beneath my feet, the hum of the APU shifting as the engine spun up. It's like an old song when I danced it too many times to forget. The captain's voice came on again. More rush this time. Slurred, even. That's when I really started to worry. Not because I thought something was wrong, but because I knew it. When you've flown through sandstorms, lightning storms, and nights where your windshield might as well be black velvet, you learn to hear stress in another pilot's voice the way musicians hear a wrong chord. Still, I did nothing. Just clutched the armrest and hoped it was all in my head. It wasn't. We just started our takeoff roll, engines throttling up, fuselage rattling with acceleration when I felt it. A lurch. Too steep, too fast. Like someone overcorrecting. Then came the noise over the intercom. It was faint, accidental, but unmistakable. Breathing. Heavy. Labored. And then nothing. Not the peaceful kind of silence. The kind you get before everything falls apart. The first jolt wasn't the worst part. It was the sudden pitch forward. Like the plane had hit a pothole in the sky. The kind of drop that leaves your stomach somewhere near your throat and makes every passenger stop pretending to be calm. The lights flickered. A baby 2 rows back started crying. Somewhere behind me, someone gasped. What was that? I knew exactly what it was. Up front, the flight deck had gone quiet. And I mean dead quiet. No updates. No course corrections. No autopilot chimes. Then we dropped again, this time sharper. More violent. The woman in 8B shrieked as her coffee launched into her lap. Luggage shifted in the overheads. Seatbelt signs flickered like they were as panicked as the rest of us. My instincts took over. I didn't think. I just moved. Unbuckled. Stood. A flight attendant rushed toward me, wide-eyed. Ma'am, you need to sit. The captain's out, I said, already stepping past her. You know it. I know it. And you need to let me through that door now. She froze. Her mouth opened, then shut again. How do you? I can hear it, I said, steadying my voice even as the plane rocked again. Your first officer's fighting for control alone. You've got less than a minute before this turns into a dive no one walks away from. She glanced toward the cockpit door like it might explain everything. Then back to me. You're a pilot? Army. Black Hawks. 600 hours in dust zones and mountain passes. I've handled controls with more shrapnel in the dashboard than this plane's ever seen turbulence. I didn't say it like I was bragging. I said it like I just recited the number of steps in a fire drill. Because right now, that's what it was. She still hesitated. What if you're wrong? She whispered. Then I'll sit back down and spend the rest of the flight with egg on my face, I said. But if I'm right, and you don't let me in, none of us are landing. That's when we dropped again. Oxygen masks deployed. Gasps turned into screams. Someone behind me shouted, "Is this normal? What's happening?" And that was it. The flight attendant moved. She keyed a code into the emergency panel beside the cockpit and swung the door open. The first thing I saw was chaos. Captain Reynolds, who I'd only seen in passing, was slumped over the control yoke, dead weight. His right arm hung limp like a marionette with cut strings. His head tilted awkwardly toward the throttle quadrant, breathing ragged. I knew that look. Heart attack. Beside him, Malik, first officer fresh from his regional jet days, was trying to pull the yoke back, both hands white-knuckled, sweat pouring down his neck. He looked up when I stepped in, confused. What are you? Move, I said, my voice cutting through the air like rotor wash. He hesitated, blinked, almost protested. Then he saw something in my face, whatever authority looks like when it comes without stripes, and he let go of the yoke. Only for a second, just long enough for me to grab it. And then I had the bird. It wasn't mine. Not really. Not officially. But planes don't care about paperwork. They respond to hands, pressure, rhythm. And mine remembered. The yoke fought back like it wanted to buck me off. The 737 was in a shallow dive, engines still screaming at climb, thrust, airspeed bleeding into redline. Alarms blared, synthetic voices shouting, "Pull up." Terrain. Pull up. Over and over like a chant. Throttle back. I snapped. Malik blinked. What? Throttle. Idle. Now. He obeyed, reaching across the still slumped form of Captain Reynolds to pull both levers back to idle. The engines wound down, their roar fading just enough for the cockpit to feel human again. I kept both hands firm on the yoke and nudged back gently, too much, and we'd stall, too little, and we'd keep diving. I needed feel. I needed trust. And most of all, I needed this plane to remember how to listen to me. Hydraulics are good, I muttered. Trim feels stiff. Autopilot. Disconnected, Malik said. When the captain out. I get it. The altimeter ticked down fast. 3,900 feet. 3,500. The city below was coming into sharp relief, houses and highways suddenly much too close for comfort. Where's ATC? I asked. They've been trying to reach us. I haven't had time. Get them now. He nodded and grabbed the mic. This is Flight 739. Mayday, Mayday, we have an incapacitated captain. Aircraft temporarily under passenger control. Repeat, passenger in control. The radio crackled. Come again? 739? Did you say passenger? Malik glanced at me. I gave him a quick nod and reached for the comm myself. This is Nora Whitaker. Former U.S. Army pilot, call sign Clover. I've got the bird. Silence. Then, Clover? As in Black Hawk Clover? Affirmative. A pause. Then a different voice came through, steadier, older, probably a supervisor. Copy that, Clover. You have priority vectors. Turn heading 250. Maintain altitude, 3,000. You are cleared to return LaGuardia. EMS en route. I didn't answer. Just adjusted our heading, watching the compass swing westward. The plane was finally leveling. The violent shudder was gone. But the tension, that was still here. Behind me, I could hear Malik breathing, like he was trying to decide whether this was still real. You really flew Black Hawks? For 7 years. Combat. I glanced sideways. I wouldn't be here if I hadn't. He looked down, ashamed. I'm sorry. For earlier. I just thought. I know what you thought, I said. Doesn't matter now. But it did. And we both knew it. We held steady at 3,000 feet. That might not sound like much, but when you're in a bird carrying over 100 souls, 3,000 feet feels like threading a needle blindfolded. The city glistened below us, Rivers like polished glass, cars like ants, the skyline rising like a jagged breath. Malik stayed quiet, eyes darting between his instruments and me, like he couldn't decide whether to ask 100 questions or not. I didn't blame him. His captain had collapsed, his plane had nearly nosedived, and now a woman from Seat 9C was in control like she owned the sky. Reynolds still breathing? I asked. Malik leaned over and pressed 2 fingers to the captain's neck. Barely. Shallow pulse. Might have aspirated. Make sure he's stable. We're not losing anyone today. He nodded, then hit the cabin call button. Back in the galley, the flight attendants, wide-eyed, white-knuckled, were trying to keep the passengers from slipping into full-blown panic. I could hear the muffled sounds through the partially ajar cockpit door. Babies crying. Prayers whispered. A man shouting for answers. Then another voice, this one calm, firm. I need everyone to stay in their seats and buckle in. We've got a veteran pilot at the controls. She's trained. She's calm. She's saving your lives. That was the same flight attendant who'd blocked my way before. Guess I'd passed the audition. Malik returned his focus to me. You need anything? I shook my head. I've got her. But I need you to prep for landing. Start the checklist. We'll be coming in fast. He swallowed. You're planning to land this yourself? I didn't come up here to sightsee. Right. I glanced over at him. You're good, Malik. You froze back there. But who wouldn't? You're still standing. That counts. I didn't feel good. No one does in their first real emergency. You learn to move through the fear, not wait for it to leave. That's what they drilled into us during deployment training. Fear wasn't something you waited out. It was something you packed into your vest and carried through the fire. The controller came back on the radio. Clover, emergency cruiser standing by. You are clear for approach to runway 22. Winds light and variable. No other traffic on final. Copy that, I said, adjusting the heading. It was a short vector, tight and low. No room for miscalculation. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Malik tapping the fuel gauges. You're flying like you've done this 100 times. I have, but never a 737. No, I said, but physics don't change. Stick, throttle, rudder. It's all just rhythm. Then I paused, took a breath, and added, we don't land in simulators. We land in storms. You're in one now. You with me? Malik straightened in his seat. With you. And that was all I needed. Descending toward LaGuardia feels like threading a needle through a beehive. There's no such thing as wide open sky when you're dropping into one of the busiest corridors in the country. But today, the sky was ours. I could feel the aircraft lighten as we dropped below 2,500 feet. The nose stayed steady, just the way I needed her. This wasn't a chopper, and she didn't respond a touch the same way. But I could tell. The jet was listening to me now. LaGuardia Tower crackled in again. Flight 739, this is Tower. You're number 1 on final. Winds 5 knots out of the west. Emergency crews standing by. I answered, copy, Tower. Gear down. Flaps 30. We're coming in. Malik followed my lead now without hesitation. You could feel the shift. In the cockpit, in the cabin, in the sky itself. The panic had faded into focus. Altitude 1,000, Malik called out, his voice steadier now. Runway in sight. I squinted through the haze. There she was, runway 22, painted like a welcome mat. Blacktop stretching out across the edge of the East River like the city had remembered how to breathe just in time. In the back, the passengers must have felt the change. A calm tension replaced the chaos. People weren't screaming now. They were holding hands, whispering names, praying into seabacks. I could hear the murmur even through the reinforced cockpit door. I never asked to be the one flying this thing. That's the strange thing about experience. It doesn't give you a warning before demanding you show up. 500, Malik said. I took a breath. Spoilers aren't. Armed. Reverse thrust. Set. Okay. I whispered. Let's bring her home. The wheels kissed the tarmac a heartbeat later. It wasn't perfect. I came in a little fast, flared a second early, and the rear tires thumped harder than I'd like. But she stayed centered. The nose dropped smoothly. Reverse thrust kicked in like clockwork. The aircraft slowed, brakes warm but not smoking, nose pointed straight ahead. Applause broke out in the cabin the moment we came to a stop. Real, unprompted, breathless applause. People crying, laughing, cheering. I leaned back, suddenly aware of how hard my chest was rising and falling. How every inch of my arms ached from gripping the yoke. My pulse thudded in my ears. Malik looked over at me, 1,000 questions behind his eyes. But all he said was, "You did it." "No," I said, finally letting my hands fall from the controls. We did. He nodded. Still, you just landed a 737. I smiled faintly. Yeah, not bad for a woman in seat 9C. The engines wound down to silence, the kind that feels louder than the roar it replaced. Emergency vehicles flanked us on both sides of the runway, fire engines, ambulances, flashing red and blue, a reminder that the world had braced for the worst. But we were here. All wheels on the ground. Cabin intact. Every soul accounted for. Malik slumped in his seat like the tension had physically drained out of him. Medical's rolling, he said, watching the ambulance team move toward the aircraft's forward stairs. They'll get Reynolds first. Looks like he's coming to. Good, I said quietly. He's going to be okay. The cockpit door opened behind us, and the same flight attendant, Rachel, I'd later learn, stepped in. She looked at me like I'd just stepped off a spaceship. I don't even know what to say, she stammered. Then don't, I replied. Just keep doing what you're doing. You held it together back there. I almost didn't let you up here. But you did, I said, meeting her eyes. And that made all the difference. She nodded, eyes glassy. They're going to want to talk to you. The airline. The news. Maybe the FAA. They can wait, I said. Right now, we've got 150 people who need to know they're safe. And with that, I stood. My legs protested, half adrenaline, half exhaustion, but I moved through the door and into the cabin. You'd think people would swarm, shout questions, flash their phones. But instead, they just stood, watching, silent, like they weren't sure if they were supposed to clap, or bow, or just absorb what had happened. The guy in 9A, who'd spent most of boarding bragging about his private flight sim setup, actually stood and stepped aside as I walked by. I thought you were just, trying to impress someone, he muttered. Don't worry, I said with a tired smile. I get that a lot. The woman from 8B stood too, still blotting coffee from her shirt. I'm sorry, she whispered. I didn't answer right away. I just looked at her, really looked at her, and saw the fear behind the mascara and judgment. I nodded once. You're here. That's enough. Further back, a little girl with a glitter unicorn backpack reached out and touched my arm as I passed. Are you a real pilot? I crouched beside her. I am today, I said. Her mom gave me a tearful look that said everything words never could. At the door, a paramedic stepped on board with a stretcher team. I moved aside as they headed toward the front, giving them a quick rundown of the captain's condition. Military habit, clear, concise, no fluff. As I turned to step down the stairs, the paramedic looked at me again. You're the one who landed it, right? Yeah. You ever done that before? Commercial? I mean. Nope. Remind me never to play poker with you. I chuckled for the first time that day. Outside, a ground officer was waiting with a clipboard and a wide-eyed stare. Are you? Nora Whitaker, I said. Seat 9C. Civilian. He blinked. Ma'am, I think the whole airport wants to shake your hand. Tell them they'll have to wait in line. They put me in a room with beige walls, fluorescent lights, and too many questions. The kind of room where they usually take unruly passengers or lost luggage disputes. Today, it was for something different. 2 suits came in, one from the airline, the other from the FAA. Both wore the look of men used to being in control. Neither seemed entirely sure how to talk to a woman who just landed their plane without clearance or credentials. The FAA rep, a graying man with a sharp haircut and a tighter jaw, spoke first. Ms. Whitaker, do you understand how unusual this is? I nodded. Perfectly. He studied me. You had no authorization to enter that cockpit. No legal right to assume control. I also had no interest in watching 158 people crash into the East River, I said. You can cite whatever line you want, but if you'd been up there, you'd have grabbed that yoke too. The airline guy jumped in, friendlier. Nervous. We're not saying we're not grateful. Frankly, everyone on that plane owes you their lives. But, well, this opens questions. Insurance. Liability. Media. Tell them what happened, I said. Tell them a passenger recognized a crisis and acted. Or tell them whatever version doesn't tank your stock price. Either way, I'm not asking for anything. They both blinked at that. You're not pursuing anything? I shook my head. No lawsuits. No book deal. No fame tour. I was in the right seat at the wrong time, that's all. The FAA guy cleared his throat. Your record's clean. We pulled your Army service file, impressive. Why'd you stop flying? My jaw tightened a fraction. A mission in Kandahar went south. 1 bird down. I brought the other one back, but lost the medevac I was escorting. 6 Marines. Their names never left me. He nodded slowly. And you never reapplied for your license? I didn't want the sky anymore. The room went quiet. After a moment, the airline rep leaned forward. Well, maybe now you'll reconsider. I know people. There are paths back. We could use someone like you. I raised an eyebrow. That an offer? It's a conversation. I stood, shaking the stiffness from my legs. You've got my number, I said. But let me warn you, I don't do passenger service announcements. When I stepped out of the admin building, the first thing I saw was Malik. He was standing beside a row of EMS vehicles, holding 2 coffees and looking like he hadn't slept in days. When he saw me, he held one out. Black, no sugar, he said. Figured that's how a pilot like you takes it. I took the cup and sipped. Not bad. We stood there a moment, watching crews tow the 737 to a maintenance hangar. It looked peaceful now. Just another aircraft on the ground. But I knew how close it came to being something else entirely. They said Captain Reynolds will be okay, Malik said. Good. They're not blaming you, you know. In fact, there's already talk about commendations. Quiet ones. I gave him a look. I'm not in this for ribbons. I know, he said. That's why it matters. He hesitated, then asked, do you think you'll fly again? Like, really fly? I looked up at the sky, clear now, blue stretching wide overhead. The kind of sky you can lose years in if you're not careful. Maybe, I said. But if I do, it'll be on my terms. Malik smiled. Then I hope I'm on your crew. A week later, I was back in Brooklyn, in the tiny walk-up I'd barely left during the last 2 years. My duffel bag sat untouched in the corner, still zipped from the trip that didn't go as planned. I hadn't made it to Salt Lake. I never even left New York airspace. But somehow, I'd gone farther than I had in years. There was a voicemail waiting on my phone from the Department of Defense. That part surprised me. I hadn't heard from anyone with a mill email address in ages. Ms. Whitaker, the voice said, deep and calm, we'd like to speak with you about recertification opportunities and an instructional role at Fort Rucker. The incident aboard Flight 739 has reached the right ears. The right ears. I let that phrase bounce around in my head for a while. Back in the Army, the right ears meant someone who mattered had taken notice. Could be opportunity. Could be trouble. This time, it felt like a door cracking open, when I wasn't sure I had the strength to walk through. I poured a drink instead. I don't usually, but this time felt different. Like a wake, only no one had died. A ceremony for something I thought I'd buried coming back to life. The news ran a brief segment that night. They didn't name me. Just said, an off-duty military pilot assisted during a critical in-flight emergency. I preferred it that way. Let them imagine the hero was tall and square-jawed and draped in medals. No one needed to know it was a woman in old jeans, who hadn't held a flight stick in years, who almost didn't speak up at all. And yet, I kept getting letters, emails, messages, handwritten notes from passengers. One said, you saved my father. He was in 14A. We didn't know until he came home and told the story. Thank you. Another, I never believed in guardian angels. I do now. There was even a drawing crayon on construction paper from a little girl with a unicorn backpack. It showed a stick figure with wild brown hair flying a smiling airplane, sun beaming in the corner. Underneath, she'd scrawled, my hero. I kept that one on the fridge. I wasn't used to being seen like that. For years, I'd been the woman who disappeared, who avoided reunions, skipped ceremonies, let the Army fold behind her like a chapter best left closed. But now, I was getting mail. A few days later, I met Malik for coffee in Manhattan. Neutral ground. He was different. A little older in the eyes. A little more sure of himself. You know they're giving me an award, he said. You deserve it, I replied. You didn't panic. You held the line. He laughed softly. I froze like a rookie. You stayed in the seat. That's half the job. He looked at me across the rim of his coffee. I've been thinking about what you said. About learning to move through the fear. That's what you did, isn't it? I didn't have a choice, I said. The fear came with the uniform. We just got real good at carrying it. Then I want to learn that, he said. Not just to fly. To carry it. The way you do. I didn't know what to say to that. So I just nodded. You will. 3 months passed before I stood on a flight line again. Not as a passenger. Not in an airport terminal with a boarding pass in hand. This was Fort Rucker, Alabama. The old haunt. The place where kids learn to become pilots and pilots learn to survive. Where I'd earned my wings years ago, sweating in a canvas jumpsuit, pushing a TH-67 Creek harder than any machine should fly. It looked smaller now. The buildings hadn't changed, but I had. They gave me a badge, a locker, and a temporary post as a guest instructor. Just a trial, they said. Just see how it feels. The first time I walked into a classroom of 20-something aviators, I could feel the skepticism. I wasn't what they pictured. Too quiet. Too calm. No flight suit swagger. But then I told them the story. Not the version from the news, but the real one. About Flight 739. About how I froze the first time I grabbed the yoke again. About how my voice shook when I told air traffic control I had the bird. And then how I didn't let go. After that, they listened. I taught them what no simulator could. Not just how to pull a bird out of a dive, but how to read fear on a crew member's face. How to trust your gut. How to make the call when no one else wants to be the one who's wrong. In one exercise, I asked a cadet, if your co-pilot slumps over mid-climb, and the radios are jammed, and every protocol says, wait for clearance, what do you do? He stammered. I'd wait for backup. I shook my head. You act. Because if you don't, no one else will. That day, I saw something shift behind his eyes. 6 months after Flight 739, I was back in uniform. Not full-time, not the way it used to be, but enough to remember who I'd been. The Army didn't advertise it. There was no press release. But inside the community, word spread. About a former pilot who brought a 737 home when everything went wrong. My old call sign came back too. They started calling me Clover again. At first, I cringed at it. Felt like wearing someone else's coat. But it fit better than I remembered. One evening after a long day of flight evaluations, I got a call from Captain Reynolds, the man who collapsed at the controls that day. His voice was thin, but strong enough. They told me what you did, he said. I don't remember any of it, but my wife does. My kids. They do. You're lucky, I said. You had Malik with you. And a solid crew. I had you, he replied. That's why I'm still breathing. He paused, then added, I've grounded myself. Medically. Not going back up. But if you ever need a recommendation letter for anything, you have mine. I thanked him. And hung up feeling something I hadn't in years. Closure. They installed a plaque near Gate C-12 at LaGuardia. Small, brushed steel, easy to miss unless you were looking for it. It simply read, in honor of those who rise when no one asks them to. On March 4th, Flight 739 landed safely because one passenger chose to act. No name. No photo. That was my request. Because this wasn't about me, not really. It was about the quiet skill we carry, the instincts we sharpen over years of doing hard things without applause. The decisions we make when no one's watching and the stakes couldn't be higher. Malik visits sometimes. He's on regional flights now, working his way toward long-haul captain. He brings his logbook, asks me to critique his landings. You still fly like a commuter, I'll tell him. A little less throttle finesse than you need. Then I smile. But your instincts are good. You're going to make one hell of a captain. He grins every time, like it's the first time I've said it. That businessman from Seat 9A, Daniels, I later learned, he's become something of a traveling evangelist. Gives talks at corporate seminars now. Don't underestimate the woman in row 9, he likes to say. She might be the one flying you home. It used to embarrass me. Now I just let him have it. People need stories that shake their assumptions. If I get to be that story, so be it. He mailed me a letter once. Said that day changed how he leads. Said he started listening more, especially to people no one else takes seriously. That, I think, might be the real legacy. I still don't fly commercial often. Not because I'm afraid, because I see too much. The small hesitations. The tight corners in flight plans. The strain in a pilot's voice on the intercom. I see everything now. But I fly military sims with my students. Teach them what turbulence can't. I talk them through engine flameouts and instrument failures, and yes, even cockpit collapses. And when they ask how I kept calm at 30,000 feet, I always give them the same answer. I didn't. Their brows furrow. I wasn't calm. I was ready. That's the difference. One crisp spring morning, I walked into the hangar early. The place was empty, sun angling through the windows like soft gold. And there, tucked into the corner, was an old Black Hawk, retired, grounded, but still proud. I climbed up into the cockpit, ran my hands over the controls, closed my eyes. And for just a moment, I was there again. Kandahar. Northern Hills. Night ops. Radio chatter in my ears. The weight of every soul behind me. But this time, there was no heaviness in my chest. No ghosts in the corners. Just the quiet. The peace of someone who did what needed to be done. A cadet once asked me, how do you know when you're ready to fly again? I thought about it for a long time before answering. You don't, I said. The moment tells you. And when it does, you don't ask for permission. She nodded slowly, understanding something deeper than words. Flight 739 never shows up in the official records. Just a brief line in an airline safety log. No crash. No casualties. Just a safe arrival with an unusual footnote. But for those of us on board, it was a moment that split time. Before and after. Fear and action. Doubt and resolve. Real pilots never lose their wings. They just wait. And when the world needs them to fly again, they don't ask. They just do what they were born to do. And they bring people home.